How are you there? Today is 29 June 2023. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? Why are you accusing me? Why are you punishing me? That is the cry that Zimbabwe is sending out to the whole world. What did Zimbabwe do to deserve all this ill treatment, to deserve all this punishment from the global powers? You will discover as I've been looking at things that are happening to me and other people around me, and my life experience is that there is nothing wrong that you did or victim. It's just that the perpetrator of your pain is dealing with something else that has got nothing to do with you, but it's got to do with how they think. Zimbabwe is where it is today because of how Britain thinks. It's not the sin of the Zimbabweans that they were colonized by the Britain. It's not the sin of the Zimbabweans that after winning the war, Britain came again and attacked them through ASAP, deindustrializing Zimbabwe, turning that country through ZANU-PF and other nefarious political means of bringing the country to its needs, therefore destroying the ability of the Zimbabwean society to express themselves freely and successfully in this global village that we live in. It is because of the jealousy of the British people and their hatred and refusal to accept that God created all men equal, including black men as well. So, what did I do wrong? What did you do wrong, Zimbabwe? Nothing. You did nothing. It's just the white man that God put in power cannot understand that God also created other people who are non-white. Okay. So they are dealing with their own frustrations, their own demons within themselves. What am I talking about? I am talking about the continued subjugation of the Zimbabwean people by the British colonial masters. Yes, sir, I said it. As Zimbabweans, we must stop just thinking that ZANU PF is our enemy and it just ends there. ZANU PF is what our real enemy uses. Our real enemy is Britain. ZANU PF's failure is to understand how to fight the British by using its own people. I've told General Chiwenga before on this channel that Mr. Chiwenga, your people are your weapons, not your enemy. ZANU-PF does not understand fully this war. When Britain has waged war on Zimbabwe and through ZANU-PF, ZANU-PF doesn't understand all of the mechanics that are involved. I'm not saying ZANU-PF isn't fighting Britain. It has fought Britain. But why has it been failing? And why has Robert Mugabe, why did Robert Mugabe fail? And why is Emerson Mnangagwa keeping on failing? This is what I'm going to talk about in this video today. And what it is that I am bringing forward that I believe we as Zimbabweans should do going forward in order for us to win in this global world, in this global economy. First of all, I told you we must identify the enemy at the apex is not Idi Mnangagwa or ZANU-PF. At the top of it all, at the top of it all is Britain. It's not even Russia. I know I've said that Russia is our enemy. Yes, it is true because of their of what they are doing together with Mnangagwa and all of these presidents that do not want to follow the rules-based society, who want to be corrupt, destroy their own communities or countries for self-enrichment, for their own selfishness. So that alliance above Idi Mnangagwa is Vladimir Putin, who's using Wagner Group across Africa to destroy our continent. Now, that whole alliance or that system that is led by Putin is allowed, okay? It's allowed to exist. Why? Because the chief enemy, the other bigger, the what can I call it? The bigger triangle, he's got Britain at the apex. Now, Britain and Putin are not friends. Let me listen to me very carefully. Britain and ZANU-PF are not friends per se, but put salt, take that with salt. I will explain later. Now, however, the attack is very convoluted. It even includes them using their own enemies against you, Zimbabweans. them using Russia and ZANU-PF, which is also the enemy of Britain, against the people of Zimbabwe, including infiltrating ZANU-PF and having people like characters like Idi Mnangagwa being raised to become the leader of the country for the purposes of satisfying British interests in Zimbabwe. And what are those British interests? I will tell you, very sneaky, very, very sneaky interests. You would have thought that it is the gold and the diamonds. Not entirely. That is also part of it. But right now, that gold and the diamonds is now in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese and other people and ZANU PF and stuff like that. So you would think that perhaps we have won the war. Also, the land question. You think that the land is in the hands of the blacks, so we have won the war. Not entirely. Listen very careful. Can you please fasten your seat, please? Because I'm gonna take you through a rough ride. The ride is going to be rough. So let us go forward. What is it that they are interested in Zimbabwe, Britain, our enemy? Let me tell you what they're interested in. They're interested in making sure that Zimbabwe remains a pariah state forever. So, so when they attack our society, listen to the words I use. They attack our society so that our systems and our institutions are weakened such to an extent that they are not able to produce any uh, utility out of our people. In Zimbabwe, we produced doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers. But however, all of those people are not able to use their skills to build Zimbabwe. Do you know why? Because our system has been screwed up already. So the war isn't only about taking your mineral resources on the ground. No, the war is taking your system as a resource, your system of governance, system of society. That system is able to build you into an upper middle class economy and compete in the world. It's like the Chinese have got a good system, the Americans have got the best system, and the Australians have got a good system. Have you ever had any problem in Australia? Have you ever heard that Australia government is corrupt and then the country goes down? Do you know why? Because Britain is not attacking the Australian system. New Zealand is a stable country. Do you know why? Because Britain is not attacking New Zealand. Why are African countries unstable? Because they are attacking African countries. So what is it that I'm saying they're attacking? It is your system. Systems management is at its core of the British war against the poor fellow Zimbabweans. You listen to what I'm saying? Don't worry about your gold. Your gold, what's what you call it? Makorokoza can just go mine gold in the Britain can just buy gold. They don't need to come and point a gun to you to take gold. That was what they used to do a long time ago. When sister generals came, they came with the guns and they themselves, the white people did the mining. Now they no longer do the money themselves. Henrietta Rushoy is going to buy gold as they buy from all the Makorokozas. And then they're going to sell it to UAE, who's going to sell it to Switzerland. Switzerland is going to buy it, and then Britain is going to buy it from Switzerland, or going to buy it from UAE using British pound, which they printed from thin air. So at the end of the day, they will have the gold and give you some pounds. All right. But at a very cheap price. So these countries do not need to take your resources on the ground. They can just buy them, okay, using printed money, and you're going to take it. What they're really attacking is your systems of governance. That is why we need good governance in Zimbabwe. And the way that they're doing it is so very sneaky. Because you are going to say to me, you're going to argue and say, no, Britain did not destroy the systems of Zimbabwe. It is ZANU-PF. Well, you are actually not wrong. But I'm also not wrong by saying that Britain did destroy the systems of Zimbabwe. But as I told you, that is very convoluted, sneaky, very difficult to understand. So stick around. What they do is this. After independence, Robert Mugabe took over the country, right? He did well in the 80s as far as the economy and education is concerned. But the people that were fighting the war against the British were led by Joshua Mqabeko Nkomo, mostly the developed people and the Shonas that were part of Joshua Mqabeko Nkomo's circle. Now, when the British attacked first, they first attacked our democracy by popping up Robert Mugabe. when indeed everybody in the country knows that the country was going to be taken by Joshua Mkabugonkom. He's the one who was leading the revolution. And as he was getting in the revolution, remember Joshua Mkabugonkom already wanted us to have land. And so the British attacked that aspect of land. And by what? By propping an opponent of Joshua Mkabugonkom, which is Robert Mugabe. In fact, Joshua Mkabugonkom and Robert, initially they were both liberation heroes. So the British came between us and took Robert Mugabe, who didn't mind the land but wanted power. And therefore, on that instance, we already defeated. The land issue was lost. So they carried on with white farmers from 1980 to year 2000 until Chenjerai Wunzu said enough is enough, and Robert Mugabe was put in a corner, and the black people had to take back their land. Now let's go back to Robert Mugabe's 80s. What does Robert Mugabe's 80s do to the Ndebeles? It does Gukura Wondi to silence the uprising of Joshua Mkom. Through Robert Mugabe and Gukura Wondi, Britain was able to destroy Joshua Mkabago ambitions of giving land to the poor majority, to the poor black Zimbabweans. So when you Shona guys see that when I'm talking about Kukura Wound, now Shona people do not understand what they lost in Kukura Wound. I will tell you what it is that they lost. What the rest of the Shona people in Zimbabwe lost through Kukura Wound was the ideology of Joshua Mkabago Nkomo, which was about giving land to everyone, whether they are Ndebele or they are all Shonas. So Robert Mugabe's war in Kukura Wound was really against the interests of Shona people. Because if Nkabugo Nkomo was a president, or even if he was not a president, if he became vice president and his ideology of taking land was listened to by Robert Mugabe, our people would have gotten their land in 1980. Shona people, that's our whole country. So you're getting to see that now. I'm trying to paint a picture that Kokora Wondi wasn't just something that the Ndebeles suffered. Yes, the Ndebeles suffered in lives, but the Shonas suffered in delayed economic gratification because of what Joshua Mkabago Nkomo was standing for. And I'm accusing Britain specifically for delaying that aspect by attacking Zandebeles through Kukura Wound. So the Kukura Wound, from the perspective of the British, wasn't the hatred of Ndebeles per se, but it was it was the clamping down of that rebellion that wanted land ownership and mineral rights ownership that was exposed through the character and the candidature of Joshua Mkabago Nkomo. That is why the 1980 elections were rigged in favor of Robert Mugabe. Even though we know very well that Joshua Mkabago Nkomo was actually the most popular politician in Mashonaland. Okay, before ZANU-PF propaganda came into being, Joshua Mkabago Nkomo, if you ask the Shona elders who lived in the 60s and 70s, they will tell you that in the 60s and 70s, we knew that Joshua Mkabago Nkomo was the leader for the country, and we supported Joshua Mkabago Nkomo because of what he wanted to go to the struggle for, so that we can regain back our land that was stolen. But then what happened is the British propaganda put Mugabe into power, and the land issue was nowhere to be spoken about anymore. And therefore the people who were in charge of that ideology of the land, Joshua Mkabago Nkomo, and so they believed it is his Ndebele people, Robert Mugabe was allowed through the use of the 5th Brigade to kill the Ndebeles, to have that massacre in Matebeleland. So that massacre was to silence those political views that wanted to take land. And according to British policy makers, that was not supposed to be allowed, because that will make the British interests to be defeated in Zimbabwe. And the British interest in Zimbabwe is to keep Zimbabwe a weak state and to keep Zimbabweans to be subservient to the British economy through enslaving us. If they are not going to use the word slave, because slavery has been abolished, what we use now is cheap labor. So what really, the point I'm really trying to drive it at the end of the day, is that Britain's intention for destroying Zimbabwe is actually to keep us as cheap labor, and make sure that we cannot rise above the rest and become CEO of global companies and come up with successful startups that rule the world or that can do anything. So they want to do that by having cheap slaves from African states. So this vassal state, that is Zimbabwe, through Robert Mugabe, whom they liked, who spoke very good English, he was supposed to just produce cheap labor for the white farmers, white miners, and if they cannot find that jobs here in Zimbabwe, they were supposed to go and work in UK or in South Africa to save in the white-owned mines, white-owned farms, white-owned industries. You see the trend. It's always white-owned, 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 and the black guy is supposed to be the servant. So that is what I'm saying. That by attacking your systems or Zimbabwe, your systems can no longer produce professors that can be of use in Zimbabwe. Now, here's the thing. While they promoted Robert Mugabe, here's the thing. They had a conundrum there. If while Robert Mugabe was good for them in squashing the Ndebele uprising or that ideology that Joshua Mugabe Nkomo had of taking back the economy through the land. Because remember, during that time, agriculture was one of the biggest industries in Zimbabwe, and whoever owned agriculture would essentially be running the economy of Zimbabwe and would be the land masters. So since British were running that economy and they always want to be the land masters, so they did not want a black people to become land masters in their own country. So Joshua Mugabe Nkomo had to be silenced and then Ndebele had to be killed through Gokura Wunde. So I put the blame squarely on Buckingham Palace for all the Ndebele people that died, and very little on Robert Mugabe, because I would say that Robert Mugabe was ill advised to do that for those purposes. However, the mistake that they did not understand, or it was not a mistake, or but some kind of a conundrum, is that Robert Mugabe was so educated and he loved education. Because of that, Robert Mugabe drove an education policy up across the country that made Zimbabwe's literacy rates to be much higher than any other African country, and produced graduates and intellectual ability within the people of Zimbabwe that Britain did not see possible through without not which they didn't think is going to be possible through Robert Mugabe. Now that became a problem because as we see the close of the 1980s, we see that the Zimbabwean education industry is doing well, and the people are getting into industry, and they now pose a new threat to Zimbabwe, a new threat to Britain. Don't worry about Joshua Mugabe Nkomo and the land question. It has been squashed through Gukura Wondi, and the ZANU PF Patriotic Front Unity Accord has been signed, and it has squashed the land issue. But now here we are having these black people that are becoming smarter than they are supposed to become smarter. Because remember, Britain needs you black people to be dummies. When they gave you the education system, it was not supposed to make black people to be super educated. It was supposed to make black people to know English enough and to read and write enough so that they can take orders from the white man and work for the white man. If the white man needs you to sign papers in his office, or like is a delivery boy, they need you to be able to write and able to read, but they don't need you to be a scientist. They don't need you to be a doctor. They don't need you to be an engineer and excel and take over. However, if there is a few black kids who are so smart to be lawyers, to be doctors and engineers, since their white kids will be miserable and dumb, they will, for some reason, you take those black people, but they will elevate them and make sure that they are content. For that, the reason why they will take them is because they are useful to them. You see, a black scientist is useful to them because that black scientist will work for the upliftment of Britain, not of his own black people. That's what we have in Zimbabwe right now. Let me move forward and I'll go back. Moving forward, that our education our system as a country was destroyed, including was destroyed, such that though now we have got good education in Zimbabwe, we're producing good doctors, good scientists, good engineers, good teachers, good everything. Now, Britain could not allow that to happen in a country of black people. So the first thing that they needed to do is to deindustrialize the country. When they do that, deindustrializing means that our engineers have got no place of performing in Zimbabwe. The only way they can apply their trade will be in the United Kingdom or in South Africa, serving white companies in South Africa or white England and white affiliated countries, so that our educated sector, through what we call now brain drain, is that brain drain is drained from Zimbabwe, and then it begins to it begins to work on the economies of those countries. So you see, they've got interest in clever, intelligent Zimbabweans for the purposes of saving their interest to build their own community, to build their own economies and their own democracies at the expense of the people of Zimbabwe, where all of these educated Zimbabweans are coming from. In the meanwhile, the Zimbabwe, where all of these people are coming from, has got its institutions destroyed. First of all, it is the political systems. See, it is important for British policymakers that the Zimbabwean people political system is severely destroyed to such an extent that there can be no hope, or that can be found in it, or there can be no serious upliftment from poverty of these people. Remember, they want to keep the rest of the Zimbabweans poor, so that when Zimbabweans are poor, they can be willing to work for lower wages in white-owned companies, whether they're in Zimbabwe, South Africa, or in the UK, or in Europe, and countries that are affiliated with that system of oppression and human degradation. So here's the thing. So here's the thing. So how do they achieve that? First of all, through ASAP, they had to destroy our industries. And we do know that through ASAP, the people who suffered with the black working class, trying to kill that intellectual ability of the Zimbabweans, the nurses and the teachers. We know that in South Africa, we've got waiters who were once doctors in Zimbabwe. We've got security guards in South Africa who were once headmasters in Zimbabwe, or who were once, sister in charge in Zimbabwe, who was top level accountants in Zimbabwe, but now they are just cleaning the streets of the United Kingdom. Do you know why? Because the United Kingdom became so jealous. The policymakers that I've been telling you about, that they are actually the enemies of Zimbabwe, became jealous of our success as Zimbabwe through education in the region. They knew that if we were left like that, we will become a powerhouse in the African region, and they did not want to see that happen to black people, because they believe that education is only preserved from the white man, something which Nelson Mandela in 1963 went to jail for. When Nelson Mandela was speaking or was testifying in the Rivonia trial in 1963, he spoke about the amount of money that is invested in the white children, which is 2 Rand 57 per child, compared to 19 cents of black children, highlighting how much education has been so much heavily skewed on the uneducation, or on the miseducation of the black South Africans, at the expense of, at the same time, over educating the white class, so that the outcomes can be very much heavily skewed towards favoring white folks when we are in the job market. And then we've got parties like the Democratic Alliance pushing things like meritocracy, knowing very well that is actually mediocrity. Actually, meritocracy to me is mediocrity, because we know very well those that are going to have merit are going to be white, because owing to the historical advantages, and those that would not have merit are going to come from black backgrounds, owing to their historical disadvantage. So what I am saying is that, seeing that uh, the conundrum that the British faced, that Robert Mugabe was a threat, at the same time an opportunity. It was an opportunity to crush Joshua Mugabe Gongoma. At the same time, it was a threat because he educated his society. Whether Robert Mugabe was aware of Britain's attack on Zimbabwe or not is a story for another day. But I wouldn't know that perhaps maybe it formed part of his decision to want to form a unity accord. And it is, I do not think that Robert Mugabe was aware also when ASAP was being brought up to, was proposed to him. I don't think he was aware that the purposes of ASAP was actually not to restructure the country so that the country can pay back the IMF, but so that the Zimbabwe can be deindustrialized. So when you see something about the IMF and that debt is this thing, there is no country that needs to pay the IMF for the IMF to be viable. That debt can increase, debt can keep going higher and higher and higher and higher. What is important in a central bank that loves its people, just like the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, is actually to improve the living conditions of the people, to fight inflation, to fight unemployment, and make sure that the exchange rate is stable. If the IMF was concerned about the living conditions of Zimbabweans, they would not have advised the Zimbabwean government to undertake economic structural adjustment program, which appears to me, or which actually not just appears, but which indeed was implemented for the purposes of allowing our government to pay back its debt, of which I do argue that that was not supposed to be the policy direction that the IMF or the World Bank should have taken if they had the interest of the black Zimbabweans at heart. However, I would like to posit to you that indeed it was a deliberate attempt of destroying the black lives in Zimbabwe through ESAP, by saying, well, you owe us money, so you must pay us back. If for you to be able to pay us back, you need to cut all your government spending, your government incentives that made food affordable for black people, and also the items that